question is that the motion be agreed to. Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. National does support this bill at its first reading, the Sentencing Protection of Children from Criminal Offending Amendment Bill. We will be very interested to consider this bill. National does support this bill because it aligns pretty fair and square with the work that this national government has been doing in, first of all, putting the victims of crime first, but also a very strong cross-ministerial work program in looking after the interests of all children, but also including vulnerable children. The main provisions in this bill, it is a simple bill, and I commend the member for bringing this bill to the House. It is a simple bill. It amends or proposes amending Section 9 of the Sentencing Act to add a new aggravating factor at the time of sentencing. And as I understand the bill, the judge presiding must take into account whether or not the child who is to be under 16 years old has had a crime committed in their presence by somebody over the age of 17 years old. So an adult, albeit a young adult, having committed a crime in the presence of a young person or child under the age of 16. And so the judge at the time of sentencing is to take the fact that that young person or child was present at the time of the offence into consideration when sentencing that offender. Now, the member will be very aware that this government passed legislation earlier this year to make an aggravating factor in sentencing for corrections officers, police officers, ambulance officers, and I might be forgetting the fire service. And we did that with the support of the House because we recognised that those service providers did not ever have the option of running away from an incident. So the fireman cannot run away from a fire, and if that fireman is prevented from going about their business, as happens, and as happens to ambulance officers on a not infrequent basis, and to prison officers, they have no choice. They have to stand their ground. They have to deal not only with the emergency they face, like the prison riot we had recently, but they also have to deal with perpetrators committing offences or attempting to commit offences on them. And so you can very well argue, and I think it's very true to say, that young people under the age of 16 who find themselves in circumstances through no fault of their own in the midst of a crime scene, be it, and I think the member being cited in a P-lab and having the toxic fumes and the very real dangers of explosion around them, to family violence, to, I don't know, being sat in a vehicle that is being the subject of a police pursuit. I'm assuming that all of those scenarios are similar in that the child does not have the choice. They are children. They are in the control, one would hope, in our society of responsible adults. And so I commend the member for bringing this bill to the House on first reading, and we will have a good look at it in Select Committee. It aligns very well with the policies of this national government and a lot of the work that this government has done already in our first 5 years in government. So, some of the more detail of the bill: in the presence of a minor, so that's in a place or building where a minor is present, could reasonably expected to be present, or in close proximity to a place or building where a minor is present or could reasonably expected to be present. In other words, I think the member is saying here they don't have any choice. They're kids, they've got to do what they're told, they're minors, they get placed in these circumstances, and here we have a bill which makes the sentencing of a perpetrator of a crime an aggravating factor. Well, good on you, Asanati Lolo-Taylor, for bringing this bill to the House. I just want to go through a few of the initiatives that are complementary to this to this bill, and it is around the protecting vulnerable children. And I do have to disagree with the member that the Children's Action Plan is not going far enough. I believe it is. I believe it is putting the interests of vulnerable children first, and I think some of the provisions in that policy are going to be quite crunchy for people, but we are unapologetic in putting the interests of vulnerable children first. Why? To keep them safe. Why? Because they cannot choose the homes that they are born into or the situations that they find themselves into. They don't have that choice. We as our adults have that choice. Children do not have that choice. So I'm unapologetic, and I am proud of Honourable Paula Bennett's Children's Action Plan, and I look forward to seeing the rollout of the implementation of that and keeping our young children safe in New Zealand. Under National, we've already toughened sentences for crimes against children. We've already done work in that area. It is now a crime to stay silent if you know a child or a vulnerable adult is at risk. We removed the parole eligibility for the worst repeat violent offenders and for offenders who commit the worst murders, and we did that with the 3 strikes law, thanks to our coalition partner, the ACT Party. We introduced screening of parole applications to allow the parole board to reduce the number of unnecessary hearings. And again, this was putting the interests of the victims first, be they adults or children. But of course there are always children associated with victims. We're all mothers, we're all grandmothers, we're all aunties, and we're all family members. Every crime that is committed in New Zealand has a number of victims, and a number of those victims are children. Just as I could go through a number of initiatives, and I know my colleagues will. I just want to talk about the Victims' Orders Against Violent Offenders Bill, which is newly introduced into the House and is now going through select committee scrutiny. And this again is another complementary piece of legislation which puts the interests of the victim first. It is about protecting the victim as much as is possible from crime and criminals in New Zealand. It might be adults, in this case it's children. It is a good bill. We will support this bill through first reading, and I commend the bill to the House and thank Asanati Lola Taylor for bringing it to this House.
I call the honourable member Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure.